Hey, I'm niftynei on Twitter. I work at Blockstream on Core Lightning. I also do stuff at Base 58 and helped organize this awesome conference. But today we're going to talk about some of my things that I like spending time thinking about, which is Lightning and liquidity. Specifically, I'm going to talk about a proposal I made at the last Lightning spec meeting, which was last week. So this is I'm going to call it pre-spec, which means that the spec is in the process of being written, and I haven't made a mailing list post yet, but it's coming as soon as I get a second. So probably end of this week, next week, I'll have something out. But hey, it's a cool idea. Let's talk about it. So it's probably super early preprint, so to speak, of a not yet drafted paper. But I'm really excited about this. I think that it's going to change the game on how Lightning payments happen, and hopefully open up some really cool opportunities for more people to do stuff on Lightning, and both increasing the amount of payment traffic that's happening and just kind of getting more of a healthy liquidity ecosystem going. So kind of the topic that we're talking about is Lightning and liquidity, rebalancing edition. I actually gave a talk, maybe I'm going to ramble, it's fine. I actually gave a talk called Lightning X Liquidity back in Lightning Conference of 2019, where I introduced liquidity ads. So this is the 2022 edition, where we're talking about rebalancing. The liquidity ad thing was how do we deploy capital to the Lightning network? This is about how do we get the most out of the capital that's already been deployed to the Lightning network. So those of you who are unfamiliar with Lightning, I hear Fabrice had a great talk yesterday about how it works. I'm kind of assuming you understand channels, etc. Maybe you'll learn some stuff today. Great. Okay, so here's a node and here's another node, and they have a channel between them, and that channel has a balance, and usually the balance is in one person's favor or another. In this case, the node on the left has more liquidity than the node on the right. So if you want to send a payment through the channel, it'll move that balance over to the other side of the node when the payment happens, right? So payments move balances from one person's side to the other. Great. If another payment goes through, it gets moved over even more. So now if you want to send payments in this direction, you can't anymore because there's not enough liquidity on that person's side of the channel to move it to the other side. This is something that Renee Pickart, who's been doing a lot of kind of more theoretical research in liquidity and how liquidity works. He calls this channel a depleted channel at this point because payments have moved through it enough such that, oh, this is not my laptop. Okay, sorry. The payments have moved through the channel so much that there's not enough liquidity left on this side over here. Oh, you can see it. That's great. Okay, so there's not enough liquidity on this side of the channel. It's been depleted. So no more payments can flow in this direction. Instead, only payments can flow in this direction, right? So all the liquidity available balance is on the other side of the channel. Cool. It's been depleted in one direction. You notice that when a channel gets depleted in one direction, that automatically means it's extremely available in the other direction, right? So if this guy on this side wanted to send a payment, he would extremely be able to send a payment pretty much almost up into the size of that channel. So these are kind of so it's kind of a not a one-way thing, right? But when one side gets depleted, the other has a lot, and then the other side gets depleted. So anyways, it's not a channel ever can't route payments. It just can't route payments in a certain direction. Okay, cool. Okay, so kind of how do you come back from this? You could close the channel, but that's not really that costs money. So what people do currently, the current state of play, and how do I get liquidity back in this channel, is you have another channel that's got a lot of outgoing capacity, and then there's this magical other channel existing somewhere in the right place in the graph that also has some liquidity in it pointing in the other direction. And you can route a payment to yourself through the existing graph. So you can push out a payment like this, and as it moves, it will, what am I doing? Oh, as it moves, I don't know what happened there exactly. But the idea is that, let me go backwards so you can kind of see, oh, I have a mistake in my slides. That's a mistake. Anyways, as it moves around, the money moves with it, if that makes sense. So now when you get to the end, this is what you started with before you did the rebalance. Then you pushed a payment all the way around. And now at the ending point, this is what your channel liquidity looks like after rebalance, right? And you did that by taking a payment, sending it around through some magic channels out here, and then back to yourself. One thing you'll notice is that if you added these arrows together, it should be the same number, right? So you haven't made the total amount. This is called outbound capacity because it's the amount you can pay out, right? You haven't made your outbound capacity any larger. You've just moved it around. So you had like, let's say 1,000 sats total, 500 and 500. Here it was like 999 and 1. You just like pushed it around through the channel graph so that you still have the same total amount. It's just in different places. Okay, cool. Are there any questions about that so far? No? Great. Okay, so why is this like, seems fine? I don't know. Doing this can be expensive. What does that mean? So the way that Lightning payments are priced is that the node here has like a gate between this capacity here, and when you want to make a payment through that gate, you basically pay them money at that point. So pushing a payment around here means there's 2 gates that you have to pay. You have to pay a gate at this one, and you're going to have to pay a gate at this one, right? Because I have to push, this is mine, I don't have to pay anything to push this, so I can push this here. This is not mine, I have to pay them to push it to the other side. That's not mine, I have to pay them to push it to the other side, right? So when my payment goes around, I'm going to have to pay 2 nodes a fee to make this rebalance happen, right? Another thing that's possible to rebalance, and in fact, like the handful of times I have personally attempted rebalancing is that you may not find a route that succeeds. So you could send a payment and then it gets here and like there's not enough capacity here to send it, which means you can't send it back, so you can't finish the rebalance because there's not like a third link here somewhere in the graph that has enough capacity that you can push the amount you want to around, basically, right? So rebalances aren't guaranteed to succeed. There's no guarantee that there is enough available balance on the other channels that you have to route through to do the rebalance that makes it such that you can actually get your stuff moved around. The other thing is that it unbalances your peers' channels. So like before your peers' balance was like this, maybe they were really happy with this, but then you pushed a payment through it and totally moved it in a different direction with your rebalance, and maybe that's not as beneficial to them as if you hadn't done that, right? So this is kind of like rebalancing has external effects on other channels in the entire network graph that are connected to you. Maybe that's fine, maybe it's not. I'm not here to pass judgment about it, but it's just definitely an impact that rebalancing as a practice has. So maybe they didn't like it. I don't know. Like, okay, cool. Can we do better? Good question. So maybe like one thing of like, so when we ask like, can we do better, then this is like, so the rebalancing I talked about is basically one person is using their available capacity, et cetera, to reroute payments to themselves. So the only way that you can really do rebalancing right now is with self-payments, right? You have to like send one out and bring it back to you, and that'll like kind of move your money around between your channels. Like I said, it costs money, usually it costs money. Maybe you're not able to do it, and then you usually like upset things for other people in the graph. One of my coworkers, Christian Decker, is like of the opinion that rebalancing is like really never worth it. So can we do better than that? So maybe one way of thinking about ways to do better is like, well, what are we trying to do in the first place? One of the goals of, so why rebalance at all? One of the reasons you're doing a rebalance is because ideally you're trying to make more payments work on Lightning, right? Because if you have a Lightning channel, you've taken some Bitcoin and you locked it up into that. Most of the reasons that people do this, everyone has different reasons why they open Lightning channels. I think one of the more like ambitious ones is they want to earn more Bitcoin with their Bitcoin by running a Lightning node, right? So if you're taking money and putting it into Lightning, usually that costs you money. You have to like pay an on-chain fee, like a layer 1 Bitcoin fee. And then every time a payment gets routed through your channel, you make a little bit of money. So you're kind of betting that your ability to make money by routing payments is going to be more than you paid in on-chain fees, right? Otherwise, you'd be losing money running a Lightning node. And that wouldn't meet your goal of earning more Bitcoin with a Lightning node. So one way you can make the most of the money, the Bitcoin that you lock into it, is if you push it to one side of the channel and then it gets pushed back to you, and then you can reuse it again, right? So being able to get this balance in your channel moving like both back and forth makes it such that you can make more payments with the same amount of Bitcoin because you're reusing it, right? It's getting pushed back and forth. which I think is one reason that you do the rebalancing, right? Is because it got pushed to the other side, then you push it back so someone else can push it again in the other direction. Oh, I have pictures for this. Oh, great. Okay, great. So we can just do an animation. Reuse your liquidity. Am I going the right direction? I think I'm going the right direction. Okay, so you have a lot of payments. They're going through the channel, and then they move through the channel. The balance moves to the other side, and then it's all on the other side. So now we start sending payments in the other direction, and it flows through that way. And then we send some payments back the other direction, and it flows back that way. So it kind of like moves back and forth, right? And so you get to reuse the same Bitcoin for multiple payments, which is like the gold standard goal of Lightning, right? Cool. Okay. So like I said earlier, rebalancing is sending payments to yourself. So what if instead of me having to make these payments to myself to rebalancing it and paying the cost of that, and you note that like when we're talking about cost of running a Lightning node, if you're paying money to rebalance your channels to reuse liquidity, then the amount of fees you're charging to use that liquidity has to cover the cost of making the rebalance, right? So it's kind of like a lot of cost-benefit analysis here. Okay, so what if instead we incentivize people on the network to send payments on channels so it gets rebalanced? So instead of me having to do the rebalances myself, what if I figured out a way to like hint to people that I would like this channel to be rebalanced so that I don't have to do it, but maybe someone else, if it's like actually worthwhile to them and useful, or I can incentivize them in some way to help me rebalance my channel. So I, as a node operator, don't have to do anything, but someone, if it's like actually useful to them, will rebalance it for me. One way that we can do this, and this was actually a proposal by Clara Schickelman she works at Chain Code. We were talking at Miami last year, and she's like, Lisa, why don't we have negative fee rates on Lightning? I was like, okay, that's a cool idea. So how do negative fees work? Let's kind of like walk through it. We have a node. Usually the node has something, advertise the rates for the capital that they have on their side of the channel, right? Where does this go? So then when a payment comes through, someone wants to make a payment, they're trying to make a 100 sat payment. Target goal at the final node, they want that last node to get 100 sats. And this is their like stated fee rate. We're just going to pretend it's like 10 base fee, ignore the PPM part because that just makes my example really nice. In order to make a 100 sat payment at the end, you have to pay the node in the middle 110 sats because they're charging, ignore this, like they're charging 10 base fee, right? So this has to be worth 110 sats in order to tell the other, so if I send this person 110 sats, they will send 100 sats to my target, right? This is normal fee rates. This is how Lightning works today. Except ignore the 10 ppm thing. It's just 10 base fee because that's easy. 10 sats. So I just charge 10 sats. This is me making a 100 sat payment and getting paid 10 sats to do it. That's how that happens in Lightning today. Okay, so how do negative fees work? What if I made a negative ppm? Okay, pretend it's base fee, whatever. So instead of having to do 100 sats, now this person only has to send me 90 sats, and I will push 100 sats as soon as I get 90 sats, right? So negative fee rate means that you can push me less money, and I will, on the other end, push like a larger amount, right? So it does, that's a negative fee rate. So you get a little bit of a discount to make a payment because I really wanted you to push some liquidity to the other side of the channel. So I'm willing to give you a discount on pushing that liquidity in exchange for the fact that you're pushing the liquidity, right? Okay, because that makes the channel more balanced. Problems with negative fees is that if you've got a lot of money in a channel, you probably don't want to do all of the money in the channel at a negative fee rate, right? Because then you would not make any money on your channel. You'd be paying people to route through your channel, and that would not be very economic of you at all. So suddenly you've got the question of like, how much of my total channel capacity is like, should I make available at a negative fee rate? So, you know, as your channel capacity changes, you're not going to want, I don't know, okay. Am I going the wrong direction? I might be going the wrong direction in my thing, sorry. Okay, so if you have a lot of capacity, you probably want to put it on sale, right? So when you have a lot of available capacity, you probably want it to be negative so more people will send payments to the other side. However, if you have not, so I have a lot of capacity, I probably would want to put it on sale so people will use my channel. However, as my channel starts getting used, I probably want to change my fee rate, right? So now I'm charging 10 part per million sats or whatever. So like, anyways, so now I'm charging actually, so now it's kind of balanced. Now I'm charging like an actual fee rate. So to use it, you actually charge me money. But then like when I don't have very much capacity at all, I probably want to charge like a large fee rate, right? Because that probably means that since it's been used so much or like has actually been moved over, that's probably pretty valuable liquidity at that point, right? If it's being used. So that way you end up paying more money on this side, which is cool. Which you'll notice though, it's like I've got a fee rate to push it this way. This guy on the other side is also going to have a fee rate that they set on their own stuff. So if they're kind of doing the opposite of what I'm doing, it would be negative on their side to send payments this way, but really expensive on my side to send them this way, right? So you kind of get this cool, if you go one direction on the graph, you can actually make a payment for less than you actually like have to put up to start it. Whereas if you're going the direction that's like expensive and there's not a lot of liquidity, you actually like have to pay more money to make a payment happen in that direction. So it incentivizes with fee rates, payments moving in one direction versus the other, right? Which is cool. Okay, a lot of capacity, put it on sale. Less capacity, charge more for it. Cool. So it'd be really cool if your fee rates were dynamic by available capacity. So problem with negative fees, though, at least the way that we currently do publish fee rates on Lightning is they're like, you have one fee rate, and it doesn't matter how much capacity you have. That's just the fee rate you charge. Negative fees, though, you don't want to just put up a negative fee for the whole channel balance because that's not a good idea. It could get like drained before you had a chance to change it, etc. So instead, what if we introduce this idea of a rate card where we can kind of say, okay, what if I set up a fee rate for, it's like, okay, so I have a channel and it's going to be maybe in like 4 different states during its lifetime when you've got like almost 100% of the capacity on my side, over half is on my side, under half, and then like almost depleted, right? So we take it and we say, okay, we can kind of divide the capacity in your channel into 4 different segments, and then we just give them all price. And what if everyone could just say, okay, if my rate, and then you can just publish this. This is your rate card. You say, okay, if my capacity is super on my side, I'll give you a discount. If it's pretty much near the middle, I'm going to charge a little bit, If it's starting to get depleted, I'm going to start charging you a little bit more. And then if I like really don't have as much in this channel, like, yeah, you're going to pay me a lot of money for that because this is probably a pretty expensive route, etc. And it might be one of the last payments I can make on this channel, so you're going to pay me for that, like capacity, etc. So what's cool about this is now you have dynamic kind of fee pricing of where the liquidity is in Lightning Network. So super available capacity is at a discount. So moving payments in directions on channels such that it moves them back towards the middle. So making a payment on this channel is going to bring it closer to the middle. Whereas making payments on channels that are unbalanced is very expensive. So all of a sudden you've incentivized people who are making routes and making payments to either push channels back towards balanced or to only use channels that are already like kind of in the middle. So what this does as like a incentive economic model is it makes payments that are either difficult to make because there's not a lot of available liquidity, really expensive, so you're getting paid for being on a very like limited route, if that makes sense. So you automatically make more money if you've got capacity in a direction where there's not a lot, so to speak, but only if your channel is whatever. Anyways, this is a proposal. When I get the email out, if you have better ideas about this, you should definitely post them on the listserv. But the cool thing about this is that as an ecosystem of Lightning payments, now there's suddenly an incentive for someone to find routes with negative fee rates all the way through them. We make a payment, they're, one, getting a discount, but they're also rebalancing all those channels that they flow through, right? So this makes Lightning more reliable because payments are going to naturally flow in places that push the network towards more balanced, such that there are more balanced channels to make payments on, if that makes sense. So, right, so what this is actually doing, this negative rate when you have a lot of capacity, it's actually taking what you would have been spending on rebalancing or attempting to rebalancing and externalizing that so that instead of you having to do the rebalances for yourself and finding your route through the graph back to yourself, now you've suddenly made it an external thing where you're paying what you would have paid in those rebalance fees to anyone who's able to find a rebalance path, right? And so with rebalancing, that is like from the graph perspective of yourself in the network, and it makes it like kind of this mono view, like your availability and like what is the economic route to do rebalancing from a single node point is very limited. By externalizing that to anyone in the graph can see it, sort of, it's a kind of hand wave. Explain why I'm hand waving in a second. I don't know what time it is. Basically, you make it such that anyone can do the rebalance for you, right? They just have to be able to find the negative thing in the graph, and maybe like where their perspective or where they are located in the graph, making a negative payment actually makes sense for them, whereas for you it wouldn't because of what your location is. Cool. Cool. So we make rebalancing. So you would have paid a cost to rebalance. Now you pay a cost to rebalance to anyone who's able to make the payment instead of to the people that have the liquidity that you're pushing it through. It's cool. Okay, so then a question you get is, doesn't this leak my channel balance? Because if I try to make a payment at if someone tries to make a payment at a certain rate, but that's not available, then I have to tell them where my current thing is. The answer is yes, it kind of leaks your channel balance, not within a bucket, right? So people will know, hey, my channel balance is, thanks. Hey, my channel balance is in a range, but you don't leak like exactly what it is, right? So right now people can probe your channel balance anyway. This is like definitely giving them a hint of where you are, but the trade-off there, you're making a trade-off of you leak a very granular, like not granular, coarse, you leak a very coarse idea of where your balance is, but the trade-off of that is that people are paying you more because of, will be paying you more when you have less, sort of thing. So it gives you a little bit more control of ability to price your liquidity over the lifetime of where it is and how much it's worth. But the trade-off of you now have this very coarse information that you're leaking when someone tries to make a payment and you're like, okay, you didn't pay enough in fees because I don't have that much liquidity. So if you want this payment to go through, you need to pay more in fees for this thing. Another question I got last week at the Lightning Spec meeting is like, well, doesn't this make payments more unreliable? Because if I just keep trying to make it like the negative fee rate and like that's not available, it'll keep failing. And the answer is yes. However, if you're trying to make a payment and you want it to be reliable, you can guess a higher fee rate and just pay the higher fee rate out of the bag. And so you pay for the higher fee rate to make your, so if you're paying through, like, let's say 4 channels, you don't know what the liquidity situation is on each of those 4 channels, you can make a reasonable guess that they're in the, I don't know, what is it? They've got like maybe, I don't know, 75% available, or like maybe up to like 25% available, right? So you could pay like the 3rd payment bracket or whatever, and your payment will succeed as long as it isn't more than 25% depleted or whatever, if that makes sense. So you can kind of pick before, without even knowing anything about it, if you want it, if you don't want, if speed matters to you, you can choose to pay a little bit more, and it's more likely to go through. Whereas if people are like, I don't know, you've got some like thing where you're just trying to see if you can make money rebalancing channels, you can have a lot of payment failures by trying to make payments at low rates by finding negative routes through the graph. And that could just be a thing that you do without having to actually trust that it'll make it through. Or maybe you keep trying at low rates and that your payments fail. Maybe you don't care if the payments fail. Maybe you're not trying to make the Lightning payment today. It's like an eventually thing. Cool. So this will definitely make more traffic on Lightning, which I think is probably good for privacy because more payments going through and more stuff happening is you know, good for everyone because there's just a lot more balances moving in a lot of directions for reasons that no one knows whether you're actually making a payment or trying to do some sort of like arb on negative fee panels. But now all those like negative fee payments that are getting made are actually helping keep the Lightning network more balanced, right? Because they're moving in the opposite way. So yeah, okay, so this is kind of cool. What is the state of this project proposal? Again, it's I'm calling it pre-spec, which means I have proposed it at a meeting with a lot of Lightning spec people, and everyone was like, that sounds like a very reasonable idea. So now we're just gonna like write it up and implement it in core Lightning and the nice thing about this is it's not super complicated to implement. It is complicated to take this new, so what I'm proposing is that you start advertising information on your node. That's not something that's super complicated to do. What is complicated about it is how to use that information once it's public. So the second stage of this would be to update your routing algorithms so that they use it, or to start taking advantage of this information to try to find negative fee routes so that you get to make, discounted payments on Lightning. But we can start publishing the information without having to change any of the routing stuff. So hopefully, fingers crossed, this will be done in 2 weeks, and maybe we'll get it in the next Core Lightning release, but don't count me on that. This is cool. Okay, I think I have a few minutes for questions. I'm trying to wrap up by 11 so we can go to the Core Lightning talk in the next room, but yeah.
So if I'm trying to basically probe in order to figure out what the right fee rate is, right? How does this affect the traffic on the Lightning Network? Because for example, Solana, where you look at, they do all these transactions per second, right? But it's the transactions, what they're doing is really just an ARB bot going between the different validators, trying to coordinate the time between them, right? And so it's moved for them, they started off with, hey, we're going to try this extra gossip stuff in order to coordinate time between the validators. It turned into it was most of the gossip, most of the traffic was just this automated ARBing between the things. So what's going to be the effect of this if you have just these ARB bots trying to do the negative fee rebalancing continuously?
You're going to have a lot of traffic on Lightning. And there'll be a lot of payments happening. But, I mean, the ARBs will stop. I don't know if they'll stop, but as soon as the channels are balanced, there won't be any more places for them to run payments, right? Or I don't know. Yeah, I would assume there would be more traffic. There's going to be more probing stuff looking for these routes. But the trade-off there, though, so on Solana, I don't know what that, on Solana, the benefit of having all those, I don't know what the benefit of having all those bots running is, but one of the benefits of having the bots running on Lightning is it should make people trying to use it more reliable, right? Because when the ARBs run on Lightning, they're actually pushing the channels toward the middle, right? Which means that payment in either direction is more likely to succeed. Again, this rate card thing, I think, cool thing about the rate card is you don't have to set negative fees if you don't want to. It's now an option. It's not like you have to. I think there are certain situations where you're running a routing node, for example, that having negative fees like this on both sides really incentivizes the whole rebalancing thing. However, if you are a channel that runs a node and you expect that node to basically always ever be in one direction, this might not make sense as a sensible strategy for setting your node balance that way. So, I mean, it's this is a thing that you can do and not a thing you have to do, but making it available, I think, makes some really interesting opportunities in terms of improving reliability for the network. Yeah.
And then for the fee rate, for the rate card, maybe that when I initially opened the channel, I also set the rate card, so I wasn't gossiping that. It's hey, this new channel open has a rate card with this.
Yeah.
I said that I can vary the rate card going forward.
Yeah, so you would be able to update it whenever you want. One of the downsides of the current way that we advertise, price of a channel is that it's you get one number, two numbers, you get two numbers, you get a price per million, and you get a base fee, and that anytime you want to change that, you have to issue a new gossip message. So if you wanted to do what Rate Cards is proposing and change your balance, change how much you're charging based on your capacity changes, you could do it today, but that would require you to be sending out new gossip updates every time your channel balance stuff. You wouldn't have to tell anyone you're doing it. And I think right now even some people do update their channel costs pretty regularly. And that is expensive in terms of bandwidth on the network for gossip. Also, it's not very reliable. Gossip is not the most reliable mechanism. So one of the goals of this rate card design is that we minimize the number of updates that you have to make to your channel rate by being able to publish a set of them all at once, right? So ideally, you'd kind of figure out what is good for you for the next 2 weeks or whatever, and you'd publish a single rate card, and then hopefully that's granular enough of information that you can get the right kind of pricing on your liquidity to not have to update it. So hopefully this minimizes the amount of gossip updates that you're making on your channel stuff by giving you more granularity in what you're pricing is the idea. Yeah.
You would need to be able to understand the rate cards in order to take advantage of it, while this is experimental, be giving out both?
Yes. Yeah. So you will publish your old one, and then you'd also attach some extra information in the gossip, which is the rate card stuff. And anyone who understands what the rate cards are would be able to read it and take advantage of it and a current payment that's being paid, right? And then you just reject it if it's not in the bucket that you expect. But what you would do for that is you'd set your your legacy or your old version to the highest one on your list, basically. And then, I don't know, anyways, there's some, yeah. There's how they interact, I think, is might be a little sketchy. Not sketchy, but yeah. There's a possibility you would reject payments that aren't in. That's actually probably fine. There's a possibility that you would okay, my old one will just set to this 10 one or whatever, the old one, and then that would work for whatever percent of payments in what, three quarters of my liquidity, whatever, payments will work using the old published fee rate if I use this one. But if my channel liquidity is really low, I will reject all those payments because they're not paying the highest rate that I've published on my rate card or whatever. That's probably fine. I don't know.
It sounds like, to kind of mitigate some of that gossip overhead, you could maybe try and do something in tandem with something like mini sketch to break down.
Yeah, so mini sketch is a way of making gossip updates happen faster because the difference between mini sketch is a minification of the amount of information that you need to share to figure out what new updates you need to send between each other. This is an attempt to cut down the amount of new information that's being published. So this is reducing the total number of new gossip updates that need to be transmitted across the whole network. So mini sketch, if you publish new information, because of the way gossip works, technically that has to be sent to every other node on the network. So by cutting down the amount of new information that gets published, you reduce the amount of bandwidth on everyone's Lightning node. So hopefully this will cut a lot of the bandwidth that gossip uses because you can do more condensed information. It's the thought. I don't know, it's an experiment. Maybe it'll be useful, maybe it won't.
Would this allow large routing nodes that have a lot of channels to actually up their fee if they have access to a lot of negatively priced routes?
Yes?
So could that over time create a control structure, I guess?
What do you mean by
Could
control
more
structure?
Power over pricing in the network. So there would be nodes where then everyone would want to route it through.
Yeah.
So then it would become more centralized.
But isn't that public information about where the negative routes are or the negative things are? And wouldn't that incentivize people to open channels in places where they can earn more fees because it's profitable to?
It would be over time, yeah.
Yeah. So the idea is that by allowing people to have better signals about where liquidity is, it allows, in theory, then the deployment or redeployment of existing capital to places where payments will be more reliable and cheaper for everyone, right? Because ideally, all of those expensive or negative things will get arbed out in a way such that it's just balanced, right? And payments can move through it. And the cool thing about this is the payments, the amount you have to pay changes based on the traffic in that direction, right? So high traffic routes will, in theory, hopefully they'll be kind of more in the middle because as soon as they get imbalanced, it'll get pushed back the other way, right? It's a thought. It is a thought. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, this is really cool. I love that it incentivizes Lightning liquidity providers rather than it's socialized profits for Lightning network providers rather than just mining fees. So it limits that, which is cool. But just because we were talking about splicing yesterday, do you see splicing at all coming in adversarially game theory wise, where someone could add a bunch of liquidity and get a negative rate in somehow adversarially?
I haven't thought about it that hard. But the cool thing about splicing is it lets you do more real-time reallocation of capital, right? So that if there was the opportunity to basically you're probably going to want to put money where it's earning high fees for other people, right? Either so you can undercut them or figure out how to make your liquidity in a place so that people have to pay more. Which so ideally you'd probably want to put your capital in places where people are going to pay you more for it, right? But once you do that, that makes an opportunity for someone to undercut you by putting more liquidity in that place, right? So it's kind of a, yeah. So splicing makes it easier to redeploy capital to different places. This makes it such that the pricing of capacity is more dynamic. which gives you better signals, hopefully, about where to put the capacity with the now new splicing case ability to reallocate it. Yeah.
And there's like a 6-block wait, so if you publish that, people could be like, oh, adding it, and I'm going to change my balance. Yeah, cool.
Yeah. 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 Maybe this will ruin everything, and Lightning will totally stop working, and it'll be a really fun experiment. But I don't think so. I think that this incentivizes, again, channels to kind of hang out in the middle. Maybe that's fine. Maybe that's what we want. Maybe that'll make payments more reliable. It definitely makes, I think, some of the stuff that Renee's been doing. The problem with the stuff Renee's been doing is when channels get depleted, it's like, are people incentivized to make these channels workable again? Or is there an incentive to get people to make it such that there's liquidity for payments to continue flowing? And I think that this helps with that. That's a thought. Cool. I don't know what time we're at. Do we have any more questions? Maybe need to go. Cool. Okay. So at some point soon, someone will be writing up a spec for this. Probably me. I think Zeman already put out a whole thing on the mailing list about it because he thought it was cool.
He did outside of the negative fee rates, I think it was for addressing something else, which I think is interesting. It means that there's clearly interest in adoption if it's not just for a single use case, right? But it was overall reliability of routing, which is cool.
Yeah.
Z-Man doesn't do specs though. He just does really long mailing list posts.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
He puts it on the mailing list so someone else can write the specs. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's
So
a
it might
Zeman
still be,
thing.
sorry.
No, it's cool. I mean, this will be this is pretty low key, I hope. Anyways, cool. Okay, I think that's everything. I think we have a break now. I did my talk earlier than I said I would because I'm gonna go run next door and do this CLN thing. This was we had a speaker cancel, which is why I'm talking today at all. Cool. Okay, great. Thanks everyone. Yeah.